Discover the amazing 5 transformative secrets to unexpected strength in overcoming adversity. Sarah sat at the worn kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed away the remnants of their hastily prepared dinner. The weight of her responsibilities pressed heavily on her chest. A community college instructor by day, a single mother by night, that veritable duality felt like an insurmountable mountain. Scanning the mundane space she occupied with Jamie, she considered the unyielding whispers of colleagues who dismissed her as just a community college instructor, her true potential overshadowed by the narrow definition of her role. An unshakable desire bloomed within her. She yearned to be more than an afterthought in an academic world that seemed contemptuously indifferent. "Mom, I haven't been feeling right." Jamie's voice broke the quiet, laced with unease. The words settled heavily in the air between them. A knot tightened in Sarah's stomach. After a rapid visit to the doctor, reality knocked on their door with chilling insistence. Jamie had a serious illness. The news slid into every corner of Sarah's heart like ice, stirring a cyclone of emotion, fear, denial, and an overwhelming urge to protect her daughter at all costs. She felt herself tiptoeing between two devastating realities: the potential loss of her child and the relentless ambitions within her professional life. Her mind raced. Was this a mere health crisis, or was it the universe testing her resolve? The parallel struggle of fighting for Jamie's health mirrored her relentless quest for academic respect. She hesitated, caught between worlds. What did she prioritize, her daughter's pursuit of wellness or her desperate need for validation? The clarity blurred, entangled with the chaos of hospital visits and the muffled whispers from her peers who still viewed her ambitions as absurd. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The pressure morphed into desperation as she considered reaching out to Mr. Grant, the retired professor whose reputation as a pillar of knowledge still echoed in the hallways of the college. She swallowed hard, stepping into his world again, hoping he'd imbue her with new resolve. The thought of confronting her colleagues, laying bare the biases and dismissals she faced, sent shudders through her. Would they see her as a nuisance, an overzealous woman scorned with an inflated ego, or would they recognize the strength she summoned from the legacies of her fierce ancestors? Yet the peril held a sharp edge. Risking everything for a fleeting moment of clarity could send her spiraling out of both the academic ladder and her roles as a mother. In the throes of this moral quandary, the pulse of her anxiety quickened. The balance teetered precariously, a house of cards poised to collapse with a single breath. As she prepped her notes for a decisive meeting with the faculty to unveil her ambitious proposal, a sudden phone call shattered her focus. It was the hospital. The fear gripped her heart, twisting it mercilessly. Jamie's condition had turned dire, leaving her on a precipice, tugged between the haunting specter of academic ambition and her parent's instinctual battle to save her daughter. The clock ticked loudly in her ears, drowning out reason, leaving a single thought to cut through the chaos. Would she honor her fight for respect or seize her daughter in her arms? The choice felt impossibly agonizing, knowledge swirling within an abyss of desperation. Sarah gripped the phone tightly, her knuckles whitening as the voice on the other end outlined the gravity of Jamie's condition. Each syllable felt like a lead weight, chaining her to the moment, stealing the breath from her lungs. The fragility of her world, a single misstep away from irreparable loss, tightened around her like a vice. With one foot in the sterile white hospital room and another in the realm of academia, she stood at a crossroads. The urgency of Jamie's health eclipsed every other concern. Yet another voice whispered insistently, "What about your dreams? Are they not worth fighting for, too?" A profound conflict ripped through her. Her dual existence was no longer a mere balancing act. It had become a matter of survival, not only for Jamie but for herself and her aspirations. In that stark, fluorescent-lit corridor, clarity began to surface amid the chaos. She realized that her journey towards professional fulfillment could parallel the fight for her daughter's wellness. Perhaps the strength she sought to reclaim her position in the academic sphere would mirror the resolve she needed in this crisis. Fighting for Jamie and asserting her own worth were intertwined struggles. Determined, she made her way to the hospital room. With each step, she silently rehearsed the discussions she needed to have not just with the medical team but with herself about her identity and her future. When she saw Jamie lying frail in the bed, a nurse adjusting the floor drip, her heart ached. Jamie's spirit flickered like a candle in the wind, vulnerable, yet unyielding. "Hey, Mom," Jamie whispered, her voice croaking but laced with a warm familiarity that momentarily soothed Sarah's tangled emotions. Sarah leaned closer, brushing the hair away from her daughter's forehead. The smile that crept onto Jamie's face was a lifeline, drawing Sarah deeper into the depth of her maternal instinct. Each breath her daughter took was both a reminder and a rallying cry. She would not just be Jamie's caretaker, but also the fighter who would not yield to adversity in any form, be it illness or professional belittlement. Glimmers of insight sparked within her. The strength to face Jamie's illness could transform her approach to academia. In every hospital visit where she pushed for a doctor's attention, she would channel the same tenacity into the faculty room where her voice could break through the chatter of dismissal. The impossible moments blended into a singular resolve. She would become the advocate for her daughter's health and her ambitions. Leaving the hospital that evening, Sarah felt a flicker of conviction ignite within her. She was no longer simply the community college instructor. She was evolving into a proactive advocate for herself and Jamie. Tomorrow, as she navigated the intricate politics of the college, she would carry this newfound tenacity within her. As darkness enveloped the evening sky, she pondered the meeting just hours away. Who would she confront? What arguments would disarm her colleagues? The thought invigorated her soon. They would see the fire within her and understand her vision was not absurd but vital. Yet, just as hope surged through her veins, another thought intruded. Was her voice strong enough to change their perceptions? Would the shadows of self-doubt creep back and to sabotage her resolve? As she climbed into bed, these questions loomed over her, pregnant with uncertainty. The moment of truth approached, and Sarah understood that stifling ambitions would not be an option anymore. The time had come to face the doubters, to unravel their misconceptions, and to reclaim her identity without compromise. With determination coursing through her, she surrendered to sleep, her heart racing with anticipation for the battles that lay ahead. Tomorrow would not simply be a day, it would mark the beginning of her transformation. The morning light seeped through the curtains, illuminating Sarah's cluttered desk, remnants of half-finished lesson plans populating the surface, papers weighty with expectations. She took a moment to breathe, steadying herself for the upcoming meeting. The resolve she had felt last night shimmered in her consciousness, already feeling oddly fragile under the stark glare of daylight. As she prepared her materials, the thoughts of Jamie's condition loomed large, each potential setback echoing with its own gravity. Yet today was not just about Jamie. It was about asserting her right to be respected, heard, and valued as a professional. Contemplating this dual fight, she made a silent vow. She would not only advocate for her daughter but also reclaim her space in academia, where her voice had been muted for too long. The campus felt overwhelmingly familiar yet alien as she walked through the corridors. The laughter of students, the hum of greetings exchanged by colleagues, the almost poignant air of possibility, each step reverberated with a mixture of nostalgia and urgency. She needed to confront the mediocrity of their perception and dismantle the barriers constructed by doubt. Entering the meeting room, she noticed a constellation of faces, some familiar, others aloof. They regarded her with an air of mild curiosity, as if she were an underdog preparing for an unwinnable battle. Sarah felt the weight of their gazes and wondered if they could sense the storm boiling within her, the tempest of ambition fueled by a maternal bond. "Thank you all for coming," she opened, her voice steadying itself amidst the flutter of paper. "I appreciate the opportunity to speak today, not just as an instructor but as someone who believes in the vital nature of our mission here." The reactions were predictably mixed. Some nodded, while others furrowed their brows, skepticism threading through their features. But she was undeterred. Each word she spoke had the power to either elevate or undermine her intentions. As she detailed her vision, innovative programs that could enrich student engagement, and a strong focus on mental health, her conviction swelled. She brought in anecdotes of her care for Jamie, illustrating the unyielding bond between parent and child, between personal struggle and professional ambition. The connection between her daughter's fight and her own ambitions was growing clearer, a revelation that began to resonate in the room. But then a familiar voice cut through her narrative. "With all due respect, Sarah," David dismissed her ideas dismissively, "these sound overly ambitious given our current limitations. We really can't prioritize this." The dismissal stung, but it also ignited her. Instead of retreating, Sarah leaned forward, driven by the dichotomy of determination and vulnerability. "What if I told you that pushing boundaries is essential, not just for me, but for our students? Each of you knows the weight of expectations on young minds. We need to model the resilience we want to instill in them." A moment of silence stretched. The weight of her words hung in the air, leaving some in the room to shift uncomfortably as they pondered the challenge she posed. Then it came, a soft yet insistent voice. One of her colleagues, who had once seemed indifferent, now spoke up. "I appreciate your passion, Sarah. Maybe we've underestimated the impact of these changes. What are the next steps?" Waves of hope surged through her. This could be the turning tide. This could be her moment. But beneath her excitement still lurked that unsettling voice of doubt, whispering inadequacies. What if this was a rare flicker of understanding and not the start of transformation? As the conversation began to rally, she felt momentum building. Strategies were discussed, and for every critique, she met them with a revitalized tenacity. Yet, as she walked out of the meeting, an uneasy tension persisted. She had made strides, but would it be enough to hold the attention and respect she desired? Considerations of what still remained to be fought echoed in her mind, promising both exhilaration and apprehension. What would she do if the initial acceptance turned to eventual resistance, like many times before? Was she prepared for the inevitable pushback? The thought lingered. Her fight was far from over, and now she needed to prepare for the next confrontation, not just in the meeting rooms, but in the hearts and minds of those she sought to influence. As Sarah approached her office, determination surged anew. She was reshaping her strategy. This was merely an opening act. The real confrontation awaited, and she knew then that comfort was no longer an option. Her path forward would be paved with challenges that would test her in ways she hadn't anticipated. And as she contemplated her next steps, something wild and exhilarating flickered to life, time to unveil her true potential. Tomorrow would be another day, another fight, against doubt, against inadequacies, ensuring that the flames of her spirit could not be extinguished. The next morning arrived with a palpable intensity that charged the air around Sarah. The sun illuminated her office, enhancing the clear lines of her meticulous organization. Now, more than ever, she felt driven not just by obligation but by an emerging sense of purpose, a mission to assert her own worth in a world that had often diminished it. Armed with fresh strategies, she harnessed that intensity into focus. The thought of Jamie's struggles reinforced her resolve. This was not just about change, it was about transformation. With each lesson plan she crafted, Sarah integrated elements of her personal narrative, what she had learned from battling not only academia's limitations but also those overwhelming moments of despair at home. This approach felt both fresh and empowering, but lurking beneath her optimism was the recognition of the obstacles ahead. There were murmurs of uncertainty regarding the previously agreed initiatives, and David's dismissive comment lingered like a stubborn echo. Sarah knew she had to anticipate resistance. The memories of previous failures didn't resurface as obstacles but as reminders of her fortitude. At the next staff meeting, Sarah decided to present a detailed framework of her proposed programs, emphasizing not just their theoretical advantages but the practical implications they could have on students' lives. "We owe it to them to provide them with the tools they need for resilience," she asserted, her voice steady as she scanned the room, noting the subtle shifts in posture as some began to lean in. In the midst of her presentation, she spotted David. His skepticism remained, an immovable wall of indifference. Yet the rising interest from others ignited a determination within her. She shifted her focus, encouraging an avenue of discussion that involved everyone, allowing her peers' voices their due attention. Sharing their insights validated both their experiences and her own. It was exhilarating to feel the dynamic change, yet the moment was without its setbacks. David's voice broke through with a sharp interruption. But how will this even fit within our existing curriculum? It feels like piling more onto an already heavy workload. His words threatened to deflate the atmosphere she decultivated. For a fleeting second, a familiar doubt clawed at her mind. But then realization collided with his challenge. This wasn't just about presenting an idea. It was about leading people through their discomfort. Change is uncomfortable, Sarah countered, her voice calm yet firm. But isn't that precisely what we need? To evolve? This won't simply be an added burden. Instead, it can lighten the emotional toll many students feel. She witnessed subtle but significant shifts in her colleagues, a glimmer of recognition, understanding bridging the gap. It fueled her resolve, transforming potential backlash into vector motion. After the meeting, as Sarah walked down the hallway, a sense of urgency intertwined with exhilaration pulsed through her. This energy felt tangible, the first sprouts of a deeper shift sinking roots into the soil of institutional resistance. However, even as the encouragement from her colleagues felt genuine, she couldn't ignore the impending discord. What of those who had silently resisted? Would her approach spark a backlash rather than inspire a collaborative spirit? Questions churned her mind, yet she pushed them aside. Doubt would not occupy her focus. Instead, Sarah began strategizing her follow-up. She envisioned creating partnerships among peers, turning critics into allies. Finally, she would initiate a series of one-on-one conversations, aiming to bridge gaps with transparency regarding her vision. It would require vulnerability, a direct confrontation of her insecurities, but she resolved to embrace that risk. Each step she planned felt like a reclaiming of her space, a declaration that she was no longer content with merely existing within academic walls but devoted to transforming them. And as she entered her office, the strategies simmering in her mind, Sarah couldn't shake the sense of impending conflict. Not with her colleagues, but with her fears. The true test would come in redefining her identity not solely as Jamie's mother or an educator, but as a burgeoning leader in her own right. The questions lingered. Would she find the strength to confront her doubts on this journey? Was she ready for the fallout in her personal life that her aspirations would inevitably provoke? Each answer would chart the course of her evolution. As she prepared for the days ahead, the unmistakable sensation of change swept over her. The moment for revelation loomed. And just beyond the threshold of her next engagement, a question crystallized: how would she navigate the fine line between ambition and the shadow of doubt? As Sarah sat at her desk, the weight of her ambitions pressed heavily on her chest. She could feel the intensity of anticipation mingled with anxiety curling around her thoughts, creating a whirlpool of possibilities and fears. Transforming her approach was no small feat, and she was increasingly aware of the stakes involved. This moment was pivotal, not just for her professional aspirations but for her internal landscape. She spent the afternoon crafting a list of key players in her department to reach out to for the upcoming one-on-one conversations. A thoughtful strategy bubbled to the surface, but beneath it loomed the fear of vulnerability that threatened to derail her resolve. Would her colleagues view her attempts at partnership as genuine or merely an act of desperation? That evening, with Jamie settled into her homework routine, Sarah took time to reflect. Each step of her path forward echoed back to her past. The challenges faced previously, the moments of inadequacy, the whispering doubts though daunting, crafted resilience into her spirit. Every struggle teaches us something, she reminded herself, mentally reciting the core tenets of her new initiative, injecting her purpose into each syllable: empowerment, resilience, transformation. The first meeting was with Lisa, a colleague whose enthusiasm had always stood in stark contrast to David's negativity. As they sat together in the small cafe near their workplace, Sarah could feel the electricity of her own nervousness. "Sarah, I've seen what you're trying to do, it's inspiring," Lisa began, her smile warm, but Sarah could sense Lisa was holding back, wanting to gauge Sarah's commitment before diving deeper. "I appreciate your support, Lisa," Sarah replied, swirling the coffee in her cup, feeling each swirl indicated a pivotal moment. But I really need to understand what concerns you might have. The conversation exploded into a vibrant exchange, where Lisa revealed her apprehension about the workload. Listening intently, Sarah found herself resonating with the shared burden they both bore. "We've both been in the trenches," Lisa admitted. "If we can make this work collaboratively, I'm on board." The realization washed over Sarah. This dialogue, documenting pain and aspiration, was a crucial stride toward breaking down the barriers of doubt. Each conversation transformed fear into understanding, sparking insights that felt empowering rather than intimidating. Yet, the 3 days following Lisa's meeting began to unravel. As Sarah approached other colleagues, she felt a tightening grip of anxiety with each interaction. Ron was next a vital player in implementing any curricular changes. However, their conversation took an unexpectedly hostile turn. "This isn't necessary, Sarah," he said, his tone dripping with dismay. "Why fix what isn't broken?" His words stung, echoing David's earlier criticisms. At that moment, the ground felt as if it had shifted beneath her. The doubt flooded back like a relentless tide. "Isn't it about time we acknowledge that the system needs evolution?" Sarah pushed back, wrestling with a mix of indignation and dismay. "It's a risk," he replied, his face taut. "There's too much at stake." Sarah felt a wave of frustration rise. "But it's also about progress. We owe it to the students to improve, despite the discomfort." The next hours felt like a weighty silence. Each failed conversation burdened her with a heavier heart, revealing the possibility that not everyone would embrace the change she envisioned. But as she returned home that night, facing Jamie's bright eyes, Sarah knew she needed to extract lessons from the setbacks she encountered. There was strength to be gleaned from each rejection. Her determination solidified with one final thought: conquering her fears would require facing David again. With her ideas on the line, it was time to confront the negativity that loomed large. Standing in front of the mirror, Sarah rehearsed her words, her reflections steady. "The time had come to face my strongest critic, myself." With her strategy laid bare, she felt the tightness in her chest ease slightly. Tomorrow would herald the real test, her final confrontation with the shadow of doubt. Would she gather the courage to stand firm in the face of opposition, or would hesitation continue to haunt her journey towards leadership? The answer awaited her, a breath away from revelation. As dawn broke, Sarah hardly slept, envisioning her meeting with David. His skepticism often felt insurmountable, each interaction a fragile balance of hope and dread. Today, that balance would shift. She felt a surge of determination, ready to embrace the challenges that lay ahead. Arriving at the office, the atmosphere buzzed with pre-meeting tension. She could see colleagues in her peripheral vision, gathering their thoughts and preparing for discussions. Each face echoed her own apprehensions and hopes, a reflection of her own doubts and the weight of her initiative. She found David in his usual spot, cross-legged on a cafe stool, poring over a laptop. As she approached, her heart raced. Dismissing him would again plunge her into doubt, but this time she was more prepared. She took a deep breath before initiating the conversation with a simple, yet powerful, greeting. "Morning, David. Do you have a moment to talk?" He turned, an eyebrow raised, clearly intrigued but cautious. "Sure, Sarah. What's on your mind?" With the remnants of yesterday's anxiety still tickling her edges, Sarah sat down and faced him, steadying herself. "I want to discuss some potential changes in our curriculum," she began, striving for clarity and confidence. "I've been speaking with others, gathering insights, and I think there's a strong consensus that we need to evolve our approach." A flicker of skepticism crossed David's face. "Change isn't easy. It invites chaos. Why fix what works?" Maintaining eye contact, Sarah offered a counter. "But what if what works isn't enough? We owe it to our students to provide them the best possible outcomes. We shouldn't merely settle, we should lead." His brow furrowed, and for a moment, tension hung thick in the air. This was more than a discussion about curriculum. It was a confrontation with fear itself, her fear of his negativity, and the weight of high expectations. Leading requires understanding the risks involved. You can't just throw changes into the mix without data, he replied, his tone edging into condescension. Isn't our responsibility to anticipate future needs? To innovate? She challenged, feeling a surge of energy. I realize the risks, David, but I believe the outcome can be transformative. David leaned back, his demeanor softening slightly as he considered her words. Her passion, ignited by the fear of inadequacy and refined by shared experiences with colleagues, shimmered through her voice. Transformation requires knowing we may fail, he said at last, and that vulnerability is part of that journey. Exactly, Sarah countered, emboldened. But within that vulnerability lies the potential for incredible growth. Isn't that worth pursuing? Silence enveloped them, and in that moment she feared he would retreat to his traditional reservations. But instead she saw the flicker of contemplation. Sarah pressed on, realizing that this was her opportunity not just to convince David but to reinforce her own beliefs. I'm ready to take calculated risks to pilot new ideas and gather evidence before broader implementations. This isn't just a personal ambition, it's a communal goal. The reflective quiet felt heavy, then slowly shifted, morphing into a pivotal moment of recognition. She could feel the invisible boundaries break as David nodded, albeit reluctantly. All right, let us set up a meeting to discuss the findings you've gathered and devise a pilot program, he conceded, a hint of respect threading through his words. Relief washed over her, but the path ahead remained muddy with uncertainty. Sarah realized their discussion was just the first step. Gaining support among other colleagues would still demand careful navigation. As the steps she had taken created small victories, deeper obstacles loomed on the horizon, including the resistance of others who clung tightly to the status quo. Sarah's pulse quickened at the thought of continued conflict, of the many conversations yet to unfold. Leaving the cafe, she felt the thrill of progress intertwined with the anticipation of deeper challenges ahead. She recalled Lisa's encouragement and Ron's warning, tethering her resolve to the purpose driving her initiative. What if not everyone would share David's willingness to listen and evolve? Gathering her breath for what lay ahead, Sarah steeled herself for the struggle to persuade those who resisted her vision. The next challenge awaited, and she couldn't ignore the fate of her ambitions now hung in the balance. Would she have the strength to navigate this newfound tension, or would doubt prove to be her deepest adversary? Sarah settled into her desk, heart still racing from her meeting with David. Her mind replayed their conversation like a film reel, dissecting his responses, her own words. There's no turning back now, she reminded herself. Today was just the beginning. Yet doubt clawed at the edges of her confidence. Would her colleagues rally around the idea of change, or would they dig in their heels? The day drifted by, blurring into muted conversations and the click-clack of keyboards. Each moment pushed her deeper into introspection. The idea of gathering support weighed heavily on her. How would she present her vision to her peers, a mix of seasoned educators, each with years of experience, and their own firmly entrenched views? Was her approach ambitious or foolish? Dismissing her anxieties, she reached for her notes, a compilation of observations and data she had carefully curated. She needed to harness her passion and articulate the vision not just as a leader, but as a peer, someone who understood the complexities and nuances each colleague faced. After work, Sarah positioned herself in the office lounge, ready to catch her colleagues as they filtered out. She spotted Janine first, a colleague known for her fierce advocacy of tradition. Her throat tightened as she approached, but she reinforced her posture, refusing to falter. "Hey, Janine! Are you free to chat?" Surprise flickered across Janine's features, mixed with curiosity. "Sure, what's up?" Taking a breath, Sarah began. "I've been collaborating with some others about our curriculum, and I had a constructive meeting with David earlier. I think we can lead a shift that better prepares our students for the future." Janine's brows knitted together. Change is dicey. Why fix what's not broken? There it was, the familiar challenge. Maybe this was the moment for clarity. What if we're not meeting the changing needs? We have to innovate for the next generation. I've found compelling data that suggests students thrive under a revised curriculum that encourages critical thinking and adaptability. I believe we can empower our students to rise to their potential. Janine's expression flickered between contemplation and skepticism. Transforming the curriculum takes a lot of effort, and not without risks. You know that, right? I do, Sarah countered, feeling a rush of adrenaline. But the risk of stagnation is even more daunting. We owe it to our students to grow alongside them. Janine leaned back, her posture suggestive of a quiet contemplation. Sarah seized the moment to push forward. Let us gather a group and present our findings together. This needs to be a collaborative effort. I can't do this alone, nor should I. Perhaps it was her sincerity or the strength of her conviction, but Janine eventually nodded. All right, I'm in. Let us see what you've got. As they discussed next steps, excitement mingled with trepidation. Sarah knew that this wasn't just a small victory. It was the beginning of a grassroots coalition that could potentially snowball into something impactful. The thrill of collaboration ignited in her, but shadows of doubt flickered insistently. What would happen when others resisted? How would she deal with the inevitable sabotage from those who valued the status quo more than progress? Even as these worries settled in, Sarah made a promise to herself. She would transform this initiative into a movement for meaningful change. Failure was not an option, but neither was giving in to fear. The next day would bring more conversations with colleagues, more moments where her resolve would be tested. Armed with the initial response from Janine, she felt the tension coiling in her stomach, preparing for the next battle. What awaited her was not just opposition from skeptical colleagues, but perhaps an unexpected confrontation with an even deeper, personal fear, the fear of her own inadequacies as a leader. Would she find the courage to face these doubts, or would they unravel the very fabric of her ambitions? As dawn broke, Sarah found herself staring out her window, the early morning light spilling into her room like a promise. The day held potential, but her mind was clouded with uncertainties. After her conversation with Janine, she felt a flicker of hope igniting, yet it was overshadowed by the dissonance of self-doubt. What if she failed to persuade her colleagues? What if her vision crumbled under scrutiny? Arriving at school, her heart thrummed with both excitement and anxiety. Today, she would speak with several more teachers, gathering allies. Each interaction felt like a step onto a tightrope strung over her fears. The stakes were high, and every word mattered. Her next approach would be Henry, an analytical and precise teacher, often skeptical of bold changes. He valued structure and clarity, often using proven methods to forge ahead. Sarah had observed him carefully, respecting his knowledge but also understanding that he could comfortably remain anchored to tradition. She found him in the break room, poring over his lesson plan. The scent of coffee mingled with the sterile smell of paper. Her stomach twisted. Hey, Henry. Got a moment? He looked up slowly, his eyebrows raised in curiosity. Sure, Sarah. What's up? With a deep breath, she articulated her intention. I'm creating a collaborative group to discuss potential curriculum changes. I think there's an opportunity to enhance how we engage our students. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Henry's expression morphed into one of caution. Curriculum changes can be a tough sell. What makes you think this isn't just a passing trend? Sarah pressed her lips together, sensing the challenge. I understand your concern. This isn't just a whim. I've gathered significant data on how these changes can lead to improved student engagement and outcomes. Empowering our students to think critically is paramount. He leaned back, crossing his arms as he considered her words. The tension in her chest thickened. She knew he preferred data-driven approaches. I appreciate the idea of fostering critical thinking, but implementing such changes requires extensive planning and a clear framework. Have you thought about potential pushback? Yes, absolutely. I'm not naive about the hurdles. But if we don't take steps towards fostering critical thinking now, we risk rendering our curriculum outdated. Think about the students. What tools do they need to thrive in a changing world? Henry's glance shifted towards the ground, a sign of contemplation. Well, if you can present a detailed plan with relevant data, I may be interested in joining your discussions. But I want to see a solid structure behind it. Sarah's heart swelled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. I promise to provide data that substantiates our approach. I want you to be a pivotal part of this. Your voice will lend credibility. With a slow nod, he said, let us see what you can come up with. I'll consider joining the conversation. As Sarah walked away, a wave of gratitude coursed through her. Engaging with Henry had not only strengthened her resolve but also unveiled a crucial insight. To lead effectively, comprehensive planning was essential. As the day wore on, she felt the rhythm of her momentum building. Conversations with other colleagues unfolded similarly, each interaction sharpening her focus on her presentation as structure and data, revealing hidden strengths within her as a planner and strategist. Yet, with each victory came a whisper of doubt. Was she genuinely enough to lead this charge, or was she merely skating by on borrowed enthusiasm? That evening, as she prepared her notes, her phone buzzed with a message from David, sparking her curiosity. The anticipation buzzed in the air, and as she opened it, she sensed a turning point looming, one that just might shake her ambition to its core. You've caught my attention. Can we meet tomorrow for a follow-up discussion? Whatever awaited her in that meeting, one thing was certain. The test of her resolve had just begun, and she could either rise to the challenge or let it drown her aspirations. The following morning, Sarah awakened with a jolt, her mind racing as she replayed David's message from the night before. The weight of uncertainty settled over her like a heavy blanket. This meeting was pivotal not just for the proposal she was championing but for her own growth. She had the opportunity to prove that she was not merely a dreamer but capable of executing her vision. As she arrived at school, the familiar hallways that once felt daunting now seemed like paths leading toward realization. Each teacher she passed acted as a reminder of the network she was beginning to forge. Sarah's mind was a flurry of thoughts as she prepared mentally for her meeting with David. He possessed experience and a well-respected voice within their educational community. She needed to present herself confidently, showing she had grasped not only the vision but the data needed to back it up. She spent her lunch hour in the library, building her presentation with meticulous care. The once muted figures in her notes pulsed with life as she structured them to tell a narrative of progress, engagement, and student success. Crunching numbers transformed into relatable stories of children who thrived when given the opportunity to express themselves openly. With each chart she crafted, she felt shifts happening within her. She was more than a participant in the system, she was an architect of change. Time flew by, and soon it was nearly time for her meeting with David. As she approached the designated room, her heart raced. She reassured herself with the knowledge that she had devoted herself to this moment. The door swung open, and David stood there, a neutral expression masking his calculating mind. "Sarah, glad you could make it. Let us dive in," he said, motioning for her to sit. Taking a breath that felt more grounded than any she had taken all day, she began. "Thank you for meeting with me. I've assembled some data reflecting how our curriculum can be enhanced for better student outcomes." As she spoke, she noticed shifts in David's body language, the brow furrowing slightly, his eyes narrowing in contemplation. Her confidence soared as he began to engage, posing questions that examined the fabric of her proposals, but also pushed her to dig deeper into her understanding of the changes she was suggesting. Observing his skepticism, she realized that this was not just a test of her ideas but of her commitment to them. She paused, shifting her approach. "I understand the risk in altering our traditional methods. But envisioning our students as creative thinkers, this is not simply about trends. It's about preparing them for a future where critical thinking is paramount." David leaned forward. "What if there's resistance from the staff? Not all of them will be on board, especially those who prefer tried-and-true methods." "Absolutely, and I anticipate that. That's why I believe building a collaborative approach with those who are skeptical like Henry will help ease those concerns. Having teachers lend their voices to this initiative will create a solid foundation." With each assertion, Sarah felt a flaring determination rise within her. This was the essence of her vision, and she was unwilling to let any hesitations obscure it. Eventually, the meeting started to wane, David leaning back thoughtfully. "You've put forward some compelling points. I can see the value, but let us not kid ourselves, change is a hard road." "I'm aware," she responded, her tone steady, but it's a journey worth pursuing. For our students, we must be the pioneers they need. As David nodded slowly, Sarah knew she had made headway. Yet, beneath the surface of triumph, the familiar gnawing doubt sparked again. Was this just the beginning of a fragile success, or a deeper confrontation with the barriers yet to come? The fabric of her aspirations was slowly coming together, but she understood that navigating the complexities ahead required more than determination. It demanded resilience. As she exited the meeting, a message from Henry popped up on her phone. "Let us talk about your proposal. I've been thinking about the structure." Her heart sprinted. With a pulse of exhilaration, she recognized this pivotal moment. She needed to strategize carefully how to consolidate her support, yet simultaneously brace for confrontation. Would she be able to balance both the enthusiasm of her new allies and the skepticism of traditionalists? The road lay unwritten ahead, and all she could grasp was the flicker of uncertainty morphing into challenge and invitation to delve further into her own capacity for leadership. The subsequent weeks unfurled like a meticulously recorded timeline, where Sarah became not just a figure within the community college, but the embodiment of change itself. She had transformed her vision into actionable steps, turning conversations with colleagues into strategic alliances. What began with a tentative exploration of ideas had blossomed into a formidable coalition, united by the desire to innovate their approach to education. As Sarah navigated her way through the corridors, she felt invincible, bolstered by the palpable energy of collaboration. The momentum was further propelled by the constructive discussions that followed her initial meetings. Colleagues once skeptical of her ambitions started engaging, signing on to be a part of her initiative. Henry, ominous in his skepticism initially, emerged as a co-leader, his analytical acumen lending credence to their proposal. Each meeting with the curriculum committee grew more confident, more assured. Sarah masterfully tied the overarching goals of their proposals: empowerment, adaptation, resilience with compelling narratives of student successes. The faculty wasn't merely listening to her anymore. They were actively participating, bouncing ideas off one another, recognizing the collective potential for positive disruption within their educational framework. However, standing at the precipice of her dreams, she couldn't ignore the persistent doubts that lingered from her initial struggles. The voices of dismissive colleagues occasionally echoed in her mind, threatening to unravel her progress. But with each success, Sarah replaced that fear with the conviction that the fight for respect and recognition should no longer be an afterthought. It was her choice to demand a place at the table. The pivotal moment approached: a town hall meeting where she would present their holistic curriculum proposal to the wider faculty. On the eve before, she meticulously reviewed her notes, her heart racing with anticipation. This was it. This was the platform to legitimize her journey, to shift paradigms. As she stepped onto the stage that day, the room buzzed with low murmurs, faces both familiar and new ready to hear her proposition. The memories of her journey coursed through her like a current, grounding her in the moment. She exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of her determination solidify into resolve as she began. "Thank you all for being here today. I stand before you not just as a community college instructor, but as a believer in our potential to evolve. The proposal I am bringing forth today stems from our collective experiences, addressing the evolving landscape students face," she began, her voice firm, echoing with purpose. As she laid out her ideas, the room fell silent, captivated. The initial flickers of skepticism began to fade, replaced by curiosity and engagement. Faces leaned forward, arms uncrossed, and conversation sparked as she detailed the collaborative efforts that had shaped their proposal. The dialogue around future risks transformed from avoidance to exploration, a shared commitment to overcoming what had previously shackled them to mediocrity. The input from her team was crucial, weaving in stories that resonated deeply with the audience. One of her colleagues punctuated the discussions with testimonials from student successes tied directly to their experimental approaches. Each account painted vibrant pictures of transformation, instilling hope while dismantling doubts within the room. By the conclusion of the meeting, the energy was electric. Sarah stood, exhilaration bubbling within her as applause punctuated her closing remarks. For the first time, she felt the notable shift not just in the responses of her peers, but in herself. Days later, As the team reviewed feedback and strategized their next moves, confirmation arrived. Their proposal had been adopted for a pilot program. The victory was more than a measure of success in policy. It symbolized her hard-won fight against self-doubt and institutional limitations. With momentum carrying her forward, Sarah now found herself an active pioneer, respected not only for her academic diligence but for her capacity to lead. The reflections of her past blended seamlessly into an empowered present where she emerged as a voice of influence. At the end of this transformative journey, she realized that the intersection of personal responsibility and professional recognition formed a foundation for her identity. No longer weighed down by the judgment of her earlier role, she could claim her place as a formidable force in shaping an educational future. As her story resonated beyond the walls of the college, her triumphs echoed with deeper meaning. She had not merely overcome adversity, she had demonstrated her commitment to growth not only for herself but for every student who would benefit from what she had fought so hard to create. To all who have witnessed her journey, remember, the path to transformation is forged not in isolation but in the courage to speak up, to advocate, and to stand firm against doubt. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.